Good evening. If you have your Bibles, we're in Luke 11, verses 37 through 54. Finally getting through Luke chapter 11. It's a long chapter, 54 verses. Remember, we're on Jesus' final journey, right? Right, thank you. Jesus' final journey from Luke 9:51 all the way to Luke 19 is his final journey to Jerusalem. So about a third of Luke's gospel is all about this last however many months it was before Calvary. So it's kind of interesting to think about how much we don't have of Jesus' 3-year ministry. As I told you before, they've actually had mathematicians figure it out. It was only about 9% of that 3 years that we even have. So it's interesting, 9%, of his life here on earth that we even have. So we don't have much, but it's interesting to look at this. I call this when Jesus crashed a dinner party. It's kind of an unusual title, but I think it makes sense when we look at the first verse. If you just think about it, I mean, you've invited Jesus over for dinner. You're a Pharisee. Congratulations. It would have to be men. Men, you're a Pharisee, and you're, prominent. I mean, you're respecting the community. People know who you are, no matter if you were in a little bitty village somewhere. They would have known that Jesus was coming to your house for this dinner party. The servants are there, everybody's waiting. But the rabbi comes in and he just sits down. That's all he does. Now remember, in those days, they didn't have like chairs and a table like we have. They had big pillows that you recline on, and the table was, probably about 16 inches or so off the floor. And they reclined when they ate. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it, guys? Right? No? All right. I thought it did. I just sleep while I'm eating. But it's interesting to think of this because they had a ritual they were supposed to do. They were supposed to show up, and the rabbi had a big thing. He would pray over the basin that you washed your hands in, and they would pour water on them from the elbow all the way down to the fingertip, both arms. And then they would wash their hands in that basin. And it was a ritual. He didn't do it. Then he washed his hands. Shame on Jesus, right? Makes you kind of wonder what in the world's going on. Well, I call this the most awkward dinner party in the New Testament because he gets in there and just chews them out. I mean, he spends like 17 verses chewing them out. How'd you like to invite somebody over expecting this nice, fine, refined meal, and all they do is chew you out the whole time? You're probably not going to invite them back, right? But that's just what Jesus did. And he doesn't do it because he's mean. He does it because he loves them. And Jesus interrupts this dinner party to really teach them some powerful truth here. So when Jesus crashed the dinner party, start with me in verse 37 of Luke 11. We'll look at down to 41 first. And notice what it says. And as he spoke, a certain Pharisee asked him to dine with him. So he went in and sat down to eat. Remember, he had talked about the lamp of the body earlier. He had talked about them seeking a sign. So here he is, somewhere from Capernaum to Jerusalem, on his journey down to Jerusalem for the final Passover. It says, so he went in and sat down to eat. When the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed before dinner. This was the custom. This is what he was supposed to do. Then the Lord said to him, verse 39, now you Pharisees make the outside of the cup and dish clean, but your inward part is full of greed and wickedness. Welcome to dinner, right? That's a good way to start. Foolish ones. Woo, keep going, Jesus. Did not he who made the outside make the inside also? But rather give alms of such things as you have, and indeed all things are clean to you. All right, so what in the world is he talking about? Well, first you see the wash that wasn't. He doesn't do the ritual wash. It's actually the word baptizo, which is where we get our word baptize. So it's almost like immersion. They were baptized in their arms, and they would wash their hands before they would even eat. And the Pharisee were shocked. They weren't shocked that he didn't scrub his fingernails. They were shocked that he didn't do the custom that they had been passed down for generation upon generation upon generation. This was about centuries of tradition, all the way back to the Mosaic Law. I mean, this was a big deal. And also understand that they had stacked bricks upon the law. You remember talking about the Talmud. The Talmud was the over 600 additional laws that they had piled onto the Ten Commandments. All right, so in their mind, there was 610. You've always heard me say, the one I find the most funny is you cannot spit on the Sabbath. Because the water from your spittle could run downhill, and you could then make a brick, and that's work. Silly? Yeah, so what they did was what some commentators called it as a build a fence around the Ten Commandments. There's no possible way that anybody could ever break one. Were people breaking the Ten Commandments? Yeah. Do you think people still break the Ten Commandments? Yeah, right? So it was a silly thing. But look at verse 39. He says, none of you Pharisees may clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward part is full of greed and wickedness. Wow. Thanks for coming to dinner, Jesus. The inward part here, Robertson calls this the within you. What he's really saying is you have been so busy polishing the outside of that goblet that you didn't care poison was on the inside. That's what he's saying. I like Adrian Rogers. He said it this way, a great Southern Baptist preacher. He said, beloved, you can shine up the outside of a jar till it gleams like glory, but if what's on the inside is rotten, you've just got a shiny, rotten jar. Right? And that's what it is. The inside, what does he talk about? The heart. Right? You guys are doing all these things on the outside to make you look good, but on the inside, you're evil, you're wicked. And Jesus, of course, knew this. And I just wonder, honestly, Sunday morning in our churches, how many people are nice and bright and shiny on the outside and rotten on the inside? Right? They're not living like they should through the week. And they just polish it up on Sunday. It's the old joke, how are you doing? What does everybody say on Sunday? How you doing? Fine. Everybody's fine. Nobody's bad or rotten or evil or even bad. Or don't feel good, right? They're all fine. The pathway to cleanliness, though, doesn't run through a basin. It really is what comes from the heart. It's understanding that, the Bible says how the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. I saw this, I think in a little short video on Facebook, this guy was talking. It was really good. And I've heard this before, but what he was talking about was if, for example, if I'm holding coffee and Dalton bumps into me and I spill my coffee, did I spill my coffee or did Dalton spill my coffee? Right? Well, if it was water, it'd be water, right? If it was orange juice, it'd be orange juice. But the point is, what comes out of me, what spills out of me, is already what's inside me. Right? If I get angry because Dalton bumped into me and I spilled my coffee, knowing Dalton, he'd say, I'll get you another coffee, Pastor Ronnie. Right? And he'd feel bad about that. But the reality is, if I've got this underlying anger, any little thing will set me off. Right? It doesn't matter what it is. It could be, as it usually is, a drive-through line. Right? It could be driving. Seems like driving, for some reason, kind of brings it out of us. Brenda says, well, you're always in a hurry. It doesn't matter if we get there 2 minutes later than what. We're still going to be early. We always leave early. I'm like, I know, but it only takes 5.3 minutes to get there, right? It's kind of like traveling tomorrow night. I know that being on the road, there's going to be all the slow people in the left lane because they don't know that slower traffic is supposed to be in the right lane, right? And some of these people now sit over there like, this is how fast I'm going, you can just go around it. It spills out of me in those moments. That's the idea here, is Jesus is saying, is what's inside of you, Pharisees, is really the thing that's rotten. And if you'll clean up the inside, if you work on the inside, then what comes out of you, the outside, will be things of love. You'll give alms, he says, out of your heart, rather than just giving alms because it's what you're supposed to do. Right? God loves a what kind of giver? Cheerful giver. Right? All right, he goes on. He picks up on that. You see it here, the woes that were warned. Start with me in verse 42. He says, but woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue. Anybody got another word for rue there? Anybody got cumin? Anybody know what cumin is? Yeah, there you go. All right, I was just checking because I really didn't know, but I know that's one of the words that's word plugged in there, right? Mint and cumin and all manner of herbs, and passed by justice and the love of God, these you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. All right, that sounds strange, and it is strange to our American ears. Verse 43, woe to you Pharisees, for you love the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplace. What was Cheers? What was Cheers all those years ago? We want to go where everyone knows our name, right? That's where we want to go. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like graves which are not seen, and the men who walk over them are not aware of them. Then one of the lawyers answered and said to him, Teacher, by saying these things you reproach us also. Look what Jesus does. Goes right at it. And he said, woe to you also, lawyers, for you load men with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. So he just goes into this on and on and on. He gives 6 woes here. All the way, well, let's pick up 47. Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. In fact, you bear witness that you approve the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and you build their tombs. Therefore the wisdom of God also said, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they will kill and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, from A to Z you've done this, who perished between the altar and the temple. Yes, I say to you, it shall be required for this generation. Woe to you lawyers. He finishes with them. For you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter in yourselves, and those who are entering in you hinder. Don't let that word woe scare you. It's really more of a groan here than a fearful judgment. It's really more of it breaks his heart judgment. It's kind of like when you see your kid go down the bad path, right? You groan. Could be when a mom saw who her daughter married, right? Can't believe you're marrying that guy. I saw a little video where this mom was yelling at her daughter who ran up the stairs. She said, at least if you're going to go crazy with that boy, does he have a motorcycle? The daughter turned around, she goes, well, it'd be cool if he had a motorcycle, right? But it's the idea here, it's a groan. It's really love with tears when you think about it. Verse 42 is strange to us, though, as Americans. They were tithing off of everything. Here's the tragedy. We think of tithing like the money we make, the salary that we have, but we don't think about the tithe like our time, or the tithe like the other stuff we have that we could be tithing off of, that we could be at least be a blessing to somebody that maybe doesn't have that. But that's really what they were doing. They were making sure that God, no, I shouldn't say it that way. They were not making sure that God got his tenth. They were making sure that that's all God got. You with me? They were counting the mints and the herbs and the cumin and all that and saying, okay, that's God's. All this is mine. So their focus wasn't on the 10%, right? Their focus was on me. And that's what he's saying here. You're doing all this outwardly, but yet, look at your heart. It was a heart that God cared about. And their heart was what's in it for me, not how do I help others. Spurgeon said it really wonderful to his congregation. He said, beware the arithmetic that counts everything except compassion. That's good. You know, it's having a heart that hurts when you know somebody else hurts. It's having that kind of soft heart. The Pharisee could tell how much mint was in the jar, but he couldn't tell how many widows were in the congregation, or how many widows were living on the street, or how many people were in need. Look at verse 44. It's really interesting. He says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. He just says what they are. For you are like graves which are not seen, and the men who walk over them are not aware of them. Some background here. In Jewish law, if you were walking and you accidentally bumped up against a grave, like maybe think of it like a big tall tombstone, and you actually touched that, you were defiled, you were unclean. Remember, anything Jewish, if you touched a dead body, obviously, that was unclean. But even gravestones to them were unclean. So what they did was they whitewashed the tombs so that people would see them and wouldn't accidentally bump into them, like if they were walking at night or somewhere through a graveyard. What he's really saying is they look holy, but they're defiled, right? I mean, think about it. A Pharisee coming, it's a pharisaical attitude, really. Jokingly, we say, you know, this is where we always sit. We always sit in this spot, this pew, this spot, right? But there's some churches that I've been in over the years that really was that family's pew. That's where they sat. And, I mean, they'd look at somebody strange if they came in and somebody was in their pew. It sounds silly, doesn't it? But we've probably all been in that church at one point or another in our life. And I can tell you, I pastored one church that actually people, when they rebuilt the sanctuary, they donated pews. That was a big thing. And there were little plaques on every pew. That's why I am completely against a plaque on a wall that talks about giving. Because I think that's your reward. That's the reward you get. It's not the heavenly reward. It's the plaque on the wall. But I remember being in that church, and that family sat in that pew, and literally their name was on it. So they want the best seats, is what he says here. It's the idea of being defiled, even by coming to church, even by sitting next to these guys, we'd be defiled. Verse 45 says, "And more than lawyers answered and said to him, Teacher, by saying these things, you reproach us also." And Jesus just dives into it. The Pharisee says, "You're talking about us too." And Jesus says, "Yeah, you're right. Woe to you lawyers. That's since you opened the door, I'm going to walk through it." He just goes on into it. Jesus answers the question with more woes. In verse 46, he talks about burdens hard to bear. The Greek translates this as burdens hard to carry. In other words, you think about what the scribe's job was back then. All right? The scribe's job was to interpret the law. Right? Much like we would say a lawyer's job is what? To know the law. The scribe's job was to know the Torah. They were supposed to know those first 5 books of the Bible. And they should have interpreted it correctly, right? But what did they do? They added 600 more laws, and they were more concerned about the 600 than they were about the 10. The original 10 commandments were kind of obsolete to them because they were focused on don't spit on the ground. Because it might run downhill, and then you can make a brick, and then you're working on the Sabbath. So, I mean, just silly stuff that they were focused on. And Jesus is saying, look, remember he called them out earlier, and he said, you can't even keep these laws. That's what he's telling them. You can't keep these laws. So how are you putting this on everybody else? No one can keep these laws. You're putting a burden on somebody that can't be kept. And he even says, touch not the burdens with one of your fingers. John Brodus, the great seminary president, said how religious authority loves the weight of the yoke for the sheep but never tries to yoke itself. This is interesting because when you look at this, you can't help but see what he's really referring to as spiritual leaders. Really, you could say Brodus is talking to preachers. Don't put burdens on your people that you're not willing to carry. If you're not willing to do it, why in the world would you put it on somebody? It would be like us judging somebody because they're not doing something that we do, right? If you're a good Christian, you'll do whatever this is, and they're not doing it, but then they're doing something that we're not doing, right? That's why Jesus said, take the big 2x4 out of your eye, man, because you're judging people for something that they can't do, but you think they should, and yet they're doing stuff that they should be doing and you're not. So Brodus went on to say that every generation has preachers who give burdens to others that they won't pick up themselves. It's literally preaching law from the pulpit. If you're a good Christian, you'll do this, you do that, you do this. I just think there's certain things we all know we should do, like read our Bible and pray. We all should be loving to each other and loving other people. I think that's universal, but I don't think being a good Christian means A or B or C or D or E, because sooner or later, brothers and sisters, we're all going to not do one of those, right? So that doesn't prove that we're good Christians. So the warning is, don't put things on others we aren't willing to do ourselves. And then he gives his sharpest rebuke, really, in verse 52. He talks about the key. And that key is the idea, again, that these lawyers should have known the word. The Bible tells us as preachers to rightly divide the word of truth. It's a beautiful word, rightly. It means what a surgeon would do to skillfully cut in just the right spot. You want your surgeon who's operating on you to cut in the right spot, right? You know, it's kind of the joke that they do, okay. I mean, I remember they put a big X on my left knee, right? It's your left knee, right? They have to ask me 14 times, yes, my left knee. Make sure it's my left knee you replace, not my right one. My right one's good, right? Your left knee. You say, well, put an X on your left knee. And the guy kind of jokingly reached over to the right, and I was like, what are you doing? You know, make sure they mark the left one, right? You want them cutting in the right spot. You want them replacing the right part on your body. So that's the idea here, is that they have the key, and when we rightly divide the word of truth, that's the key. But the key is not the lawyer. The key is the Lord. Right? It's the Logos. It's the living Word of God. And this word really, key in verse 52, is critical because it means that a steward is trusted with the key to the master's house, property. You know, if you were a steward of someone today, you would be trusted with their bank account. Can you imagine that? Being a steward trusted with a millionaire or billionaire's bank account? I mean, that's the idea here, is you have the key to the greatest truth, is what he's telling these guys. And yet, they're blowing it. The scriptures, the promises, the Messiah, instead of unlocking the door for the people, they really lock the door behind them. And it's kind of like the Catholic Church, you remember in the Dark Ages, right? You know, they used Latin. Well, nobody knew Latin but them, right? So they were saying what the Bible said. And that's not at all. If you've got that responsibility, you better make sure you rightly divide the word of truth. That it's a huge responsibility, but also it's something that needs to be pointing people to Jesus Christ. And then in 53 and 54, you see the welcome here that waits. He says, and as he said these things to them, the scribes and Pharisees began to assail him vehemently and to cross-examine him about many things, lying in wait for him and seeking to catch him in something he might say that they might accuse him. You know what I thought when I got through this today? I thought, did they even eat? Are you with me? It's a dinner party. It doesn't say, and after they pass the bread, right? We don't even know if they ate. I mean, so I'm thinking this poor guy, he was waiting to clap his hands and all the servants were going to come and do all the stuff they were doing. It was just shiny goblets. That's all there was, evidently. I mean, there was no food. There was no anything. I mean, this dinner party closes with them yelling at Jesus. I mean, you saw the word, right? Let's see what else somebody has. Pharisees began to assail him vehemently. Anybody got a different word? Huh? Provoking? Opposing? Who are they opposing? The key. They're opposing Jesus Christ vehemently, and to cross-examine him about many things, lying in wait for him and seeking to catch him in something he might say that they may accuse him. Whoo! Here they are, right? I mean, he turned it up a notch. He's on his way to Jerusalem. He knows where he's going, and he hits them right where. And also, I thought of this too. If you were that Pharisee and you invited these other Pharisees over, do you think they'd come to your house again and eat? Or would they say, who's coming? Right? I mean, if I showed up at your house for a dinner party like this, and the guy did nothing but chew me out, I'd be like, we ain't going there again. Right? I tell Brenda, it's the last time I'm going over to their house. Man, the one who called the lawyers out for stealing the key is the key. They wanted to trap him, but they couldn't trap him. By by the way, because he was opening the door, he was telling them the truth. That's the funny thing about the truth. When the light gets shined on it, there's nothing anybody really can say. All they do is get mad. It's kind of like telling somebody these are the facts, and they go, I don't care about what the facts are, right? They don't want to hear the facts. They just want to have their opinion. But think about this. Maybe this guy gets done, this guy that presented the party. I mean, we know that Nicodemus, right, was a Pharisee. And we know that Nicodemus shows up in the end, right? Nicodemus, I would say, was saved. I mean, he wanted the body of Jesus. And you think of Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man that wanted the body of Jesus. I just wonder how many Pharisees, and we don't know, but how many Pharisees do you think got saved? I mean, because he was in their face all the time. You've heard me say it. Jesus wasn't about, he fulfilled every part of the law, but he didn't fulfill the part of the Talmud. I'm sure he spat on the Sabbath just to show everybody how silly it was to spit on the Sabbath, right? I mean, he didn't fulfill the oral law because it was man's law, not God's law. But I just wonder, what if this rabbi, what if this Pharisee said, what if he was right? What if all I've been doing is polishing the God? Right? I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but there's a great movie out. It's about Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. I showed it to Blake. That was a thing I was jokingly talking to him about. I showed the movie in our high school class. Lee Strobel was a Chicago, I think it's a Chicago paper. What is that, Sun or something? I don't know what that is. I don't know. Anyway, the big Chicago paper, Lee Strobel was a writer for the Chicago paper, and he was actually going to write a book. And he wanted to write a book about it's all a lie. Christianity's a lie. So he was out to prove that Christianity was a lie. Well, there happened to be a dynamite Christian that worked in the office with him. And he said, what's the biggest thing I can use? My counter argument. What's the biggest thing I can use to refute Christianity? He said, the biggest thing you can use is disprove the resurrection. If you can disprove the resurrection, it's all a lie. Right? He said plenty of people died on the cross. But there's only one that came out. If you can disprove it. He went all out of his way trying to do it. He talked to a doctor about the sack, piercing the Lord in the side, what that would have done. Obviously that proved. He talked about the swoon theory and realized that was all a lie because Jesus did indeed die. And then he found out about all the manuscripts we have, clear back to the first century. All the manuscripts that are out there. And he realized as a writer, when you have this much documentation, it's got to be true. And Lee Strobel got saved. But in that movie, that guy says, C.S. Lewis has a quote. And I looked it up because it really got me. C.S. Lewis, a loose translation would be this. If Christianity is not true, it doesn't really matter. But if it is, it's the most important thing in the world. What C.S. Lewis actually said was this. Christianity, if false, he was actually debating about what's most important. Christianity, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. Right? Makes us think, though, how many people treat Christianity casually? I think about us as believers, how many believers just, it's the thing we do on Sunday morning. It's the shiny goblin. That's what it is. People are shiny on the outside. But what's their heart like on the inside? It's really an indictment, I think, on me and all of us, but also on just the church today. I mean, I do think we're living in the day of apathy. I think we're living in the Laodicea time. But, the reality is, imagine, Herschel Hobbs used to have a quote. Now, he was a guy back in the early 1960s that was an architect of the Baptist Faith and Message, Southern Baptist. He closed a line in his sermon like this. God does not want a performance, God wants a person. You. Just as you are. He wants us clean on the inside. Imagine what the church could do on Sunday morning if every heart was clean on the inside. What do you think Christianity would look like? What do you think God could do? 120 people in an upper room turned the world upside down. Wow. Something to think about. What could God do with us if we were clean on the inside? It's really, to me, just thought-provoking. But I'll never forget that quote from that movie, because he loosely translated it, but he basically said, if Christianity is false, it's of no importance. But if it's true, it's the most important thing there is. I think that's so wonderful to think about. Lee Strobel, of course, gets saved and writes the Case for Faith, A Case for Christ. Wrote 2 big old books, and I've only read the one, The Case for Christ, but just changed his life. He got saved, and really turned the world upside down, I think, in his own way, as far as teaching and preaching the word. Okay, who do we need to pray for? Brother David's not in the hospital anymore.
No, he's not.
He's at Scotia again.